Good evening, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Fort Wayne Community Schools Board of School Trustees. We're going to begin the meeting tonight, as we always do, with an invitation to those of you in attendance to stand with us and recite our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, with heavy accent on the word indivisible, right? Right.
Isn't it California
So,
and Oregon that want us to
we
see?
begin with the introduction of the board members, starting far right with Steve.
Thank you. Good evening. Steve Corona from the 5th District.
Good evening, I'm Glenna Yale from the 2nd District.
He's reelected for 4 more years.
Yay, congratulations.
And I'm Becky Hill from the 3rd District.
Julie Hollingsworth from District 1.
Ann Duff, District at Large.
Jordan Lebemoff, the 4th District.
And my name is Mark Giaquina. I'm an at-large member of the school board. Seated with us are, oh, Angie, how are you? Nice to have you. Barb Trout's not here, so Angela, thanks for helping out tonight and getting our board manuals ready for us and all the business of the evening in good shape. And also, our school superintendent, Dr. Wendy Robinson. Dr. Robinson, good evening.
Good evening to you.
And so with that, we go right into our agenda this evening. We start with the awards and recognitions. The first is a recommendation to the board that we recognize Mary Hess as the School Nurse Administrator of the Year, an award given by the Indiana Association of School Nurses. Let me tell you a bit about Mary Hess. This information has been shared by Dr. Robinson with the board members. Mary Hess, who is the Director of Health and Wellness for Fort Wayne Community Schools, was named School Nurse Administrator of the Year at the conference of the Indiana Association of School Nurses, which was held in Indianapolis on November 4th. She was nominated by nurses Natalie McLaughlin and Darlene Yarnell, and competed with other nurse administrators across the state to come out as the top school nurse. She's now entered in the running for the same award from the National Association of School Nurses. Now, this just conjures up all kinds of images in our minds, like where they would have the thermostat contest or the thermometer contest and the wrap the Band-Aid contest and starting and stopping the clock. But I think what it exemplifies more than anything is a care and love for the students of Fort Wayne Community Schools. So, Mary, if you would come forward at this time, we'd like to recognize you on this terrific, terrific accomplishment. And I don't know, are Natalie and Darlene here? If you are, could you raise your hands? Oh, could you come up too as the...
Okay, all of you just come on up.
Yeah, come on up.
Come on down.
Our problem.
You bet.
I will just say, when you're surrounded by all of this, like, it makes you look way better than you are.
Oh, well, that's a neat thing to say. Come on, can we get a picture of after the ones of the... Oh, I see, they're all taking their picture.
Wow, now that's support.
Did they say Natalie was here, or Darlene?
Darlene.
Darlene's.
I think so.
And now wait, before you all disappear, Darlene, you hang, if we could get Darlene to hang around up here for a second.
They want pictures.
Yeah.
Darlene?
Well, we want, and when we want Darlene, when you're done with the pictures, go ahead. We would like Darlene and Mary, if you could step over to the microphone, because it won't get picked up otherwise. And Dr. Robinson, could you pull that microphone down a little bit?
Give him Mary a
See,
microphone.
look, I'm so much taller.
It was way up high for Dr. Robinson's height, but now we're. Darlene, could you tell us a little bit about why Ms. Hess was nominated?
Well, I've been around for a long time, and I have to tell you, in the big picture of all the people that I've worked for, and I've had wonderful, wonderful leaders, Mary is certainly right there as a top-notch leader. She has done so many things to promote school nursing in the state of Indiana. She has promoted policies, and people seek her out for her opinion in the state. Her nurses are very, very proud to be in the staff that they're in, and we're just really, we couldn't think of anybody else that was any better than her. And if you look at her list of accomplishments, you'll see why it was very easy for us to nominate her, and I think probably wasn't too hard for them to select her. So we're really proud, and we're very glad that you've recognized her tonight, because she really deserves it. She does. Thank you so much.
I will say, I had the odds stacked in my favor because Darlene wrote me a poem. She wrote a poem for the people that she wrote in. So, I mean, how do you get better than that? I just want to thank all of you so much for letting me be part of the team, because I've been so blessed to work at Fort Wayne Community Schools. I believe in the work we do. I've been under the leadership of a wonderful superintendent. Every message I've ever heard her talk about has been about how do we do the best we can for our kids because they deserve it. And I wholeheartedly believe that, and so glad to follow her. Mr. Kamek has been my leader. He's helped me stretch and grow. There's not one person on that cabinet that hasn't helped me try to be a better leader. And I appreciate them so much. And last but certainly not least, the wonderful women that I work with, the nursing team dedicated to our kids. They work so hard to make sure that our kids are healthy and ready to learn so that we can do what we do here at FWCS, which I truly believe is magic. So thank you so much for letting me be part of the team.
Well, and Mary, let me just say this. It's terrific that you won this award, not just because of what it says about you and your colleagues, but because it gives the board an opportunity to see another facet of the district. And it gives us a chance to say, not just to you, but to your colleagues as well, thank you for all that you do for the district, the children, the young adults, and their parents. We so appreciate it. Thank you very much, and congratulations again.
Thanks very much.
Next, the board has a recommendation before it to recognize the marching band from Northside High School for its having placed in the top 10 in the state competition. The information to support the recommendation is that students from across the state participate in the annual marching band competition, which was held on October 29th. It's, of course, sponsored by the Indiana State School Music Association. Northside placed 9th in Class B. The Legends Marching Band has placed in the top 30 over 30 times in band director Edward King's career. Tonight, the band is represented by its drum majors and directors. So we would ask that the following come forward. Rebecca Mancia, drum major. Ajian Mitchell, drum major. Jody Passino, drum major. Marcus Farr, assistant director. Ed King, band director. And Dave West, Northside principal. Congratulations to all of you. And Mr. King, if you wanted to say a few words about this year's band, I know there's not much competition in the band area. We need you at the mic. It's the only way we're going to hear you at home is through the mic.
North side. If I really- this is my 44th year of teaching, and it's been really hard to walk away from that group of kids. They're hardworking. They work extremely hard hours in hot and cold weather, on asphalt, all kinds of stuff. And they gave, this year we had our highest placement ever at the semi-state. Can I tell them that, Marcus? Yeah. I'm gonna tell them anyway. We were third at the semi-state. And that's the highest we've ever placed at the semi-state. So we were excited about these kids. They did a great job this year. They worked really, really hard. They spent a lot of hours, and they're dedicated to what we do. We were larger this year than we've been in probably 20 years, 25 years maybe. We marched around 140. So it's a good-sized group. So I don't know, they're just wonderful human beings. They're wonderful kids, and I love working with them. I can't say anything more than that.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
King.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I think we just saw the Bill Belichick of high school band right there.
If I could say something before Mr. King. Mr. King, if you could hold on a second. When I am out and about, one of the things that parents constantly quiz me about when they talk about Northside is that I'm never to let Mr. King leave. And I hear stories about how Mr. King and that band saved students who may have been trying to figure out where their place was in society. The other thing that I want to make sure he gets credit for is as we've started the Be Instrumental program, and as we're trying to do K-12 music to make sure that music enriches the education students receive, Ed King's the model. And so what I love so much about Mr. King is he talks about what he does for students. He does just as much for adults. And so I want to thank you for the impact. You're going to be, you have a mark on us for a long time, and he is really working hard at Lakeside and some of the feeder schools to really get kids together. So thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you. Item 4 of our agenda this evening is a request that we approve our consent agenda. The consent agenda is passed each week. It consists of recurring matters. Each week we have the approval of the minutes, this time from the October 24th meeting. And then we also have the vouchers and payroll approval from the period ending November 14th and the payroll for the period ending October 14th. And those are all items that were previously budgeted, but the vouchers were actually issued. Those are kept on file at Fort Wayne Community Schools, should anyone ever care to come in and take a look at those. They're here for like 7 years or so. Finally, the personnel report, that includes a number of changes and classifications to individuals. We always ask Dr. Robinson if there's anybody in the audience she wants to introduce this evening.
Not this evening, but
We're included.
we'll send you some information about a change in Kathy's shop, some resume information. Rosie Shipman has accepted a position in Kathy's shop, and she's on the board report, but we didn't write anything else. I'll send it to you. Internal candidate.
Okay.
But we'll give you some background on Rosie.
Okay. Oh, okay, budget, okay, all right, got it. Okay, very good. Well, are there any items that the board members want taken out of the consent agenda this evening?
I'd move approval of the consent agenda as presented to us this evening.
Okay. There's a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? So carried. We skip down to new business, and there's a recommendation that we renew the administration contract with Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield. That'll be effective starting January 1st, 2017, and run through December 31st of next year. Anthem is our third-party administrator for our health plan. They provide employees with access to broad-based PPO providers and network discounts. They manage claims processing services in all aspects of the provider network. They perform utilization and medical management functions, and they provide enrollment support and customer service for our employees. The fees for medical, dental, and vision are increasing 2.7%, or about $34,000. That's the TPA fee. Reinsurance premiums are increasing 9.4%, or about $158,000. Administrative fees and reinsurance premiums are $3,126,081, or approximately a 6.4% of the total expected cost of the health plan. And that 6.4%, I guess, is the the total expected cost of the health plan is $49,179,845. So the TPA is the party who we pay a fee to come in and help sort through claims, help decide what's covered, what isn't, how to deal with individuals who feel they have the right to go out of network, all of those administrative issues that keep us and our employees following the rules of the policy, and work to ensure that they're reimbursed for expenses when those costs are incurred. Are there questions of Kathy? Kathy is did we have, we voted to renew it. I assume that's because the cost of changing would be higher than the cost of
Yeah,
simply.
and in addition to the cost of the fees, we also have provided large discounts by Anthem as part of what they do. So it's
Okay.
not just processing claims, they also provide us large discounts for the services that are provided,
Okay.
so.
Any questions about some of the services? I mean, they manage the claims processing service, all aspects of the provider network, utilizing in the medical management function, so they're managing the cost to keep the rates within reason. I assume we're doing pretty well. I mean, we seem to have been over the last few years.
We're better than most. I mean, we're lower than average. I mean, Charles might want to speak to this. He's.
Yeah. Well, we're doing well. We are working on some wellness activities and some other programs that we think will help us even more. But we're satisfied with where we are. And Anthem is the heavyweight in network and discounts, and they do a good job with administration.
I mean, that was the one thing I did want to ask, and you brought it up. I mean, we started down the road with some wellness programs about, what, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, 4 years ago. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, and that included everything from smoking cessation to.
Right.
How's that, are we seeing?
We have, I think about 25 to 40% participation. We want to get that up even higher, and we have some programs that we're going to introduce that we think will help us do that. We're working with Anthem and Parkview to design those, and not just to offer them, but to be able to say, okay, this is a return on investment. This is how we can measure whether or not these are effective. But we have the clinics, they're up and going. Parkview is running those now for us. And we've gotten back, when you have a transition, you have some drop off, but we've gotten back to pretty much where our participation level was there. And the goal is after the first of the year to roll out these programs, and we'll see an increase. Our target is 70%, and then get it up even higher than that.
So is that on a balanced scorecard?
Not yet. We have not finished the design yet. We're working with Cabinet. We just made a presentation last week to say, here are the steps that we want to take. And once we have those in place, then we'll put together a balanced scorecard. There are some things now, but I'm talking about the new processes that we're going to.
Yeah, we had a work session the other day on a totally unrelated topic, and I asked the same thing, I hope that's one of the first things we say with respect to any of the programs that we offer. Well, what are the measurables? Are they included in a balanced scorecard?
Yes,
So.
there will be.
Okay, so maybe we'll get a chance to see that once.
You will.
Okay, good.
Charles, how often do we rebid this? Do you do that?
I think, depending on what's going on, every 3 to 5 years.
Oh, okay.
But as a matter of fact, we are going to put out for bid workers' comp. We hadn't done that in about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And we just recently did a bid on mental health, the,
Employee assistance program.
yeah, EAP program. And that was, the vendor that got it by far and away was giving the best service for the best price. So that was a win-win.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And then you mentioned that Parkview set up some of the clinics for you?
Parkview is now the manager of our clinics.
Oh, okay, and then, so how many of those clinics, are those for the teachers to be able to utilize and their families?
Anyone that's on the plan,
Okay.
employees and their dependents. We have 2 clinics. One is on Auburn Road, and one is on Catalpa.
Okay.
In a lot of districts, the board members would be eligible for that, but not ours.
Keeping costs down.
Well,
You are.
Oh,
retired.
we're working on that.
Hey, I pay for it, believe me.
Oh. All right. Very
And
good.
she's a happy
Well,
client.
What's
I
that?
said, and you're a happy client. Come on.
Yeah,
wait a minute.
I do like the clinics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wish they were open 24/7, because I needed a,
Oh, yeah.
needed
you
a
asked
shot
the
for
question.
poison ivy over the summer, and I couldn't get in on a Sunday, so I had to go.
Yeah, that's true. We're not
Yeah,
24/7.
but other than that,
I don't want to.
I've been very pleased. I know, well, I got it right after
Last
you
time
did.
somebody talked about poison ivy, I got it.
No, when you got it, I got it.
Okay, well,
Your fault.
we'll remember that on the seating chart next year. So, we take
I move approval of the contract.
Second.
all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? So carried. Okay. Then the last item on the agenda is something that we had asked for, and due to Dr. Robinson's unique position as a member of the state commission, form to consider changes in the state assessment exam, or commonly known as ISTEP. I don't know what it'll end up being called, but and the ADF accountability that arises out of those assessments. We are going to get an update from her, which we expect to have all kinds of inside scoop that most school districts wouldn't hear. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Robinson.
Good evening, and I appreciate the opportunity. In preparing this, I want to thank, before I get started, Jim Detmer, who handles our testing process internally, the state testing, Laura, and then the rest of cabinet. We thought that, if you look at the title, it's all-inclusive, and what I'd like to do is to show you the agenda and then try to walk through each of these topics and then have one broad conversation, because I hope by the time we get to the end, you see that they're all interconnected, and one impacts the other. Mr. Giacomo mentioned the fact that I am on the state panel. I was chosen by Glenda Ritz to represent her along with 2 other people on this panel that was put together by legislators this spring as a replacement for ISTEP. And I just want to say before I begin that a lot of the changes in terms of trying to eliminate ISTEP came from public pressure. So I'm hoping that if parents are listening, and we're going to have this conversation with administrators, I hope that we can get this community as concerned about the whole A to F accountability. Because while, yes, there are lots of issues with the test itself, urban districts such as Fort Wayne Community Schools are even more impacted by the accountability system attached to the test. And if there are issues with the test, we should be asking the question, how accurate is the accountability system if it's based on a test that has not been as valid? So if you go to the next slide, these are the topics I want to talk about. Obviously, you can stop me at any time, but what I really want us to get down to is, so what are we going to do, and what are we going to say to our parents internally, to our staff also? So this slide is, if I just go to the slide. This is, it really speaks for itself. We have been involved in some form of state accountability since the late 80s. But if you look at this chart, it talks about from 08, 09 to current. You can see that while we had slight dips, and if you just look at language arts math and what that covers, we were going up and to the right. The dramatic drop is when the test changed, when the standards were changed and the test was realigned. One of the things that I've learned from my involvement in the committee is that a normal process would have been to decide on the standards, then to give teachers an opportunity to implement those standards in the classroom, not even every teacher, but as a pilot. And while you're doing that, figure out at the beginning what you really want to assess once you adopt those standards. After the pilot year, you then would have done an implementation year where you broaden learning from whatever you got from the pilot. Then the third year would have been the year that you actually try to have testing after you've worked the kinks out and you've given people an opportunity for teachers to teach. So if you look at our grid, when we had the opportunity to teach, when the standards were aligned with the test, when our formative test or the checks we did throughout the year were aligned to the end of the year test, we were going up and to the right. Even with dips, we were going up and to the right. So I just wanted to start with this to show what happens when you make a change without really giving practitioners, teachers, or students the opportunity to even learn or implement what it is you hold them accountable for.
But may I stop you right there and ask a question? So the point is that if you're going to have an annual test for students, there are certain, as you say, steps along the way that you're accustomed to, so that when you finally break it out, you know what it is. The results you get are reasonably related to what the test taker understands. But even then, because I remember those days when we broke out acuity, and we picked acuity because we thought it was the most likely test to train on, but we still, so I accept that, and I think it's a really important thing for the public to understand. But for those of us who think this whole process, even when it's done right, is stupid, because of all the time we have to spend preparing for and taking the test, and the length of time it takes for them to grade it and then report back to our professional educators what happened. If you're going to do a stupid thing, I guess, I don't know how to put this, it's better to do it in a way that will at least give the schools a fair chance to succeed at it. But where does that leave those of us who think this whole exercise is just a colossal waste of time?
Well, that's why I'm going to, as I walk through these next sections, you're going to see.
And even when it's done right.
Right. Well, and one of the pieces that testing experts will tell you, Indiana has, when we made the decision not to do Common Core for political reasons, we had been going down the road, because Fort Wayne was a part of that process of piloting. We had been doing that with kindergarten, first and second, for like 3 years before that decision was made not to do it. So what you did was, you made a political decision, then you changed and put a test in place that, first of all, experts will tell you we have too many standards. But if you have one, you should measure it. So because we have so many, then we tried to measure everything, and we really had not gotten past second grade in terms of this whole concept of the new way of testing. You know, using technology, having more than one answer that could be right, multiple choice writing, so we changed the whole landscape. But if you look at where it dips, that's really that last like 14, 15,
I think it's
13,
it looks like
14.
it's 12, 13 is where the dip,
13,
before the
14.
big dip. Are you
Right.
talking about the big dipper or the little
at the,
dipper?
the big dip down.
Okay.
All right,
That's
so,
14, 15.
so in here, 14, 15 was the first year we were tested. 15, 16 was the second year. We're going to test the third year in 16, 17. So for all intents and purposes, if you follow the whole process of making sure that people know what it is they're supposed to be tested on and giving teachers a chance to develop curriculum to make sure kids know the standards, we would just be doing that now. So the whole purpose for this is the last year for ISTEP. That's why the panel's put together to make a choice. But we're now in the third year, and the test still is not solid.
So is there an easy analogy, Dr. Robinson? I mean, it's kind of like if you expected somebody to snow ski, you would ordinarily put them on a set of skis, take them to a bunny hill, put them in a little chain, and, but here they're kind of
Pushing them off the big.
taking them to the top of the mountain and throwing them down the hill while they're at the first of like 5 lessons. And then they're surprised
Yeah.
that they fall down.
It's even,
I mean-
it's even more, it's worse than that, Mr. Giaquina, and I agree with your analogy. It's like when you have training wheels on kids' bikes and you take them off, same kind of thing. But what they also did while they were changing the standards is they changed the formatting. We went to the 2 different parts. We went to technology-enhanced kinds of questions. And what you're doing on some levels is in a district like ours where kids may be proficient in speaking English but not in necessarily comprehending and answering multiple choice questions, then on top of that, manipulating the technology. Plus, you all know the issues that the test company had with making sure the technology was reliable. So I think the biggest injustice we have, and this board has been adamant when you go all the way back to the leave process, we've never shied away from accountability. But what we've learned and what we talked about on this committee is figure out what you want to be accountable for. And it can't be everything, including the kitchen sink. They have said over and over again, our system measures too much, which means it measures nothing. So what we have here is, at least in the years from 85 going forward, we kind of halfway knew it was language, arts, and math. I mean, we had some semblance of an idea about what we were testing. Now we're testing, and writing, that needs to be a component, but science, and then we were doing social studies, and then we're doing the technology enhanced. So we have not only expanded what we're trying to test with one single test, which is impossible, but then we use that test to measure everything, the kids, whether they're going to be retained, whether teachers are paid, what letter grade we're going to slap on a school. So I just wanted to start off with, if the testing process is flawed, then the whole system has a shaky foundation.
That's right. And then, just looking at this graphic, we're missing the 15, 16 scores, and here we are in November.
We're going to talk about that.
So even if we were to get results back, it's not in a very actionable timeframe to benefit any particular student at all. And then, again, it impacts how we deal with our teachers and other important, critical issues are impacted by not just a flawed test, because we do have a flawed test, but even the ability to get data back in a timely fashion that would help us. Has been a very frustrating exercise these last couple of years.
Well, I don't want to tell you, but I'll keep going. We're 3 months away from testing again, and we still don't have the results from last year. So if you look at the next slide, all that is just a visual of what I've talked about, and it has, a little bit of detail about what happened. And you see this goes back to 1985. But I want to kind of get to what's out there, because I think that whatever your concerns are or your happiness is about the election last week, the part that I always focus in on, and I've said this to people constantly for the last 2 years, make sure you ask candidates what they think about education, because public education is the backbone of this country. And so what you need to know, let me tell you what's out there right now. And between now and January 20th, a lot of decisions are going to be made about whether all the work we've been involved in for the last, since 1985, does it go forward or doesn't it? So first of all, there's the state's educational agenda. So back in the spring, when I told you that there was all the concern about the fact ISTEP was too long, as a kid said, we had the spinning globe of death where the technology didn't work. So the legislators plus the state school superintendent plus the state board put these three big components together. One was the assessment panel. I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's the one where you're supposed to find a replacement for ISTEP, and the legislators did that. Another are ESSA, which is Every Student Succeeds Act. That's the federal. That is really, it was under the supervision of the state school superintendent. And a lot of that has been coming from the federal government with guidance and processes and procedure. So we've had the federal trying to put the rules together and the state trying to respond and react. So that's not quite done, but that's that piece. And then you had a separate accountability committee that was created 2 or 3 years ago, had not met, and it started meeting again this summer. So on top of all of that, these are the three big pieces, and you see I have a question mark, because lots of work and effort have gone into these, and I have no idea, I can't tell you any inside tips, Mr. Giaquina, about what the status of that will be. So if you look at the next slide.
Well, whatever it is, she won't be running. And I guess the question is, has Ms. McCormick been a part of this?
As a superintendent, she's probably gotten information from the state school superintendent. But I think the bigger question is, in campaigns, the federal Department of Education is at risk, because there aren't any assurances that they're keeping the federal Department of Ed. Lots of conversations in ESSA already about giving more freedom to states to make some decisions.
Well, that'll be, but that won't be to the school districts, that'll be to the.
No, it'll just be to the state. So I want to kind of point out some things that I think we as a community and you as a board and parents should start asking questions. Because the ESSA really became a law in December. It's been under review for years. One of the things, and I just tried to put some bullet points, whereas now we have special ed, Title I funds, Title II, Title III, that come down from the federal to the state, but we have some kind of assurance of the funding. One of the conversations that started is that becomes almost like a block grant. And now that we have charters and vouchers, some of the big direction for some of those conversations, which we should worry about, is a lot of the funding for different kinds of programs comes off the top. Well, you know what that means for us. And then the state is going to be responsible for a lot of that, which means whatever the educational policy of the state, we could have 50 different ways that this flow-through money gets distributed. So that is something that we need to be very, very concerned about. The third bullet is there is a mandate for a summative, meaning at the end, annual rating and a test, but it does not have to be a letter grade. There are different categories, and so ESSA does not require a letter grade. There are categories that are much more understandable, also on some levels a little bit more hopeful, because it says that you need improvement in something, but it doesn't slap an F on your forehead. And then the last is we're in the process of determining all of those regulations, and we are going to have a massive policy shift in terms of what happens. So at the federal level, the biggest concern, if I had to summarize what we as a board and as a community need to worry about, is the stability of the funds that we have counted on, special ed, Title I, ELL, it wasn't a lot, but it was something. Our professional learning, Title II, a lot of those title grants, that's not guaranteed. And then TIF, grants that we would apply for to supplement, none of that is on the table right now and is at risk. So this is something we need to have more conversations and be mindful of, how this is going to impact even the amount of money that's on the table to be divided up.
Now, according to your information, your next meeting is tomorrow,
Tomorrow,
and you were appointed by the current superintendent.
absolutely. We can go to the next slide.
So is there any chance that the superintendent-elect is going to say, thank you for your service, but we're going to start over?
This panel, it's been an interesting journey. And let me tell you what the 6 things were, and then I'll answer that question.
Okay.
There were 6 charges from the legislators. And one of them is the feasibility of using the existing tests or portions of whatever, reducing time, reducing costs. If you go to the next one, transparency and fairness to teachers and students. The whole requirement, which includes the school accountability metrics, have to have multiple measures, which says you don't just use one test. And then how students' test performance affects teachers' evaluations. All of those were things this committee was supposed to be looking at. And we've had test experts. There are like 23 different people on this panel, 6 of them somehow tied to legislative or the state.
Has your work today covered these 6 points?
To date, it's been a mixed bag, but we've talked about all 6 of those. We've had experts. I'll tell you that because that's really clear. But our current state school superintendent is a member of the committee and had a lot to do with what we currently do. That doesn't have to be what the new state school superintendent does. And the governor's office has an awful lot of control over what happened on this committee. And I'm sure those 3 things I showed you, who's to say that after January any of that will continue? Now, I would think they would be hard-pressed to stop and just say to people, never mind, we've spent 2 or 3 years on some of this. But if you look at the dates, I have a meeting tomorrow, and tomorrow we're supposed to be looking at the different options that committee members want to look at. But then a TAC committee, which is this technical assistance committee, made up of some of the people who've talked to us, but also the governor's office and state folks, are going to decide then what will be presented for us to vote on the 29th. We're being very honest. It's not in our hands. This committee only has the power they were given by legislators.
Yeah.
We're not making that decision. What has to happen is the governor's office, the State Board of Education, the state school superintendent. We've got a lot of work that's been done, and we're all kind of in a holding pattern.
But you're just, but the panel just makes recommendations,
Just makes
correct?
recommendations.
And those are taken for what they're worth. They're just recommendations. So you're going to vote on the recommendations on the 29th?
I think the 29th,
That'll
what
be
we're
it.
going to try to do is come to consensus, because we don't really have any power. We're making recommendations.
Right.
And so, I'm giving you all these topics and all these committees because all of them are political. And all of them now, we have to look at the shelf life of the work that's been done.
But I think it's really important that everybody understands what you said, I mean, or at least what I interpreted your words to mean. You're suggesting that if the federal government takes funds that have up to now recognized to some extent the fact that it costs more to educate children who enter our system with huge challenges, some of which you really can't appreciate until you get into the schools and put your eyeballs on, some of what our teachers work to resolve on a day-to-day basis, challenges that many of us never had. That the funding for that could very well evaporate in the form it's in now, be redirected to the states. And if your state is of the mindset that education should be outsourced to Catholic schools and Lutheran schools and Muslim schools and Baptist schools, those programs that we have relied upon to pay for those programs that work to overcome those challenges won't be there. The funding will be diverted to the programs like the voucher program in Indiana, which is one of the most robust in the nation anyway, which means that the public schools and our public school system will very likely, or could very likely, be left with the short stick, that we could not only lose the programs we have, but if those funds are diverted away from us, we are going to be faced with some very difficult choices.
Well,
I mean that's what I hear you saying.
I'm saying that, but there's even another side that sometimes we don't talk about. Our magnet programs, which have stood the test of time, the new tech, you look at the fact we had a counseling grant that we put 3 therapeutic counselors all last year. This is the second year. all of that, Mr. Giacoin, is gone. We were looking at applying for another magnet grant, because after a number of years we've had magnet programs, things have changed, and we've been looking for another, additional funding. So it is the needs of the kids who need more, but it's also, Mr. Giacoin and everybody else, how do we stay viable when now everything's going to be competition? And if you're not going to have enough money in general fund, and if you relied on magnet grants, look at the TIF grant. Without the TIF grant, we didn't give raises. We didn't give stipends. No counseling grant. So we already know that a lot of the things that we've relied on, we've been aggressive going after other funding when it didn't come from the state. So the two, you can't separate the two. So you've got the federal, which will determine what happens at the state, which will determine what happens at local. And we're so busy worrying about what the ISTEP test is going to look like. When you take the big picture, we've got bigger fish to fry.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to do very quickly, we need to meet the new state superintendent and introduce ourselves to her. I will tell you, I haven't said this to many of you, I tried on 4 different occasions to reach out to her during the campaign. Because I finally got word back saying she will call you. She never did. But I wanted to let her know that win or lose, that if she were successful, we really wanted her to know who we were and what we were doing. And I don't know what happened, but I really did make, like I say, 4 different occasions I tried through her campaign and otherwise to reach her. I even called her office in her district. So, but I think we need to try again and try again and try again to get a meeting with her, to let her hear what we are doing and how we really need her support. And that, we will certainly support her, but there has to be a relationship formed between her and the state's largest public school district, and, one that has shown that it can succeed if it's given the right tools and the right resources. So I don't.
I'll continue to reach out.
I wish you would say, that is on behalf of you and the board, because we need that relationship.
Well, and I think we've got a work session coming up, either the 14th or the 15th, where we're talking about the balanced scorecard, talking about what's important for this community, talking about how all this work gets communicated, and that may be an opportunity for us to have her, because she's not going to be in office yet, but I'll reach out, because I think she needs to see the bigger picture. But I think the bigger issue, and I'm glad you brought that up, we're at a point now, the election's over.
Right.
So what we have to do is to be very focused on what it is, and I want, as I finish this presentation, talk about what we're going to do. And one of the things we have to do is to make sure that this community continues to see that we're a best bet. That the point of connecting all of this is just choosing a test by December 1 is just the first step. And first of all, I don't think it's going to happen by December 1, because until everybody's on board in January, we can make a recommendation December 1. We're 3 months away from testing again. We have the last year of ISTEP. And so what I'm going to make sure that we do is have these conversations. If you go to the next slide, well, let's talk about ISTEP, because this is going to be, this is probably one of the most depressing parts of this presentation. But we have individual student scores. We have this technology dump that we have so much data that we're struggling to put it into usable form. That used to happen when we had CTB. Pearson has not given us the information in a usable fashion. We still don't have final grades, because there are things called undetermined, like kids, and I don't want to get into a real technical conversation, but it's that kids were not able to complete the test, or maybe they did and weren't counting as completing it. And so they're even still trying to figure those kinds of things out. So if you could, it's almost impossible to explain how we're going to talk about ISTEP and we don't even have the final. But what's even worse, if you go to the next slide, the accountability committee was formed, and that's the committee that's supposed to change A to F. Because first we have the test, and let me just say this. Here's the one thing that I have reinformed at this testing committee. I already knew it. The reason you assess is so teachers can use the information to change instruction. Now, we've added as a country, and Indiana as a state has added that you use that test for accountability. but ISTEP was never intended to measure a school's growth. It was never intended for that. So we have changed over time. We have added everything to this one test. So at the same time we're looking at the panel to change ISTEP, this committee, which started back again in August, and this is the state school superintendent, so Mr. Giaquino, who knows where this is going to go? Because what they were working on were recommendations as to how they could change accountability. And the biggest thing is that bullet at the bottom. Remember I talked about the fact you don't have to have a letter grade? There are also multiple measures, like there would be different ways other than just the ISTEP test that schools could determine that they have met accountability. So that committee has only been working since August. Nothing to report at this point, because I'm not on that committee, but Steve Yeager is on that one. If you go to the next slide, here's the part that it's almost hard to talk about. So I've just talked about the fact that we have not gotten a final grade because they're still making some decisions about ISTEP. On the 16th, the state board's going to look at how you change accountability and what formula you're going to use to determine letter grades. When we don't have the final scores from ISTEP, and we already know that there were major issues. So then they are looking at their next meeting, making a decision. So at the 16th meeting, they're looking at whether the formula to decide A to F is fair or makes sense. On December the 7th, that's when they're supposed to be releasing. So I have no idea how you can release A to F rankings when you haven't even given us the ISTEP scores. Now, if you look at what it incorporates, the one thing we do have, go to the next slide for me, Laura. We do have graduation
Are you
rates.
saying they're going to release
Go back.
the rankings or the method of the method for ranking?
The method for ranking will be discussed on the 16th of November.
Okay.
Then they are coming back again on the 7th to review what they talked about on the 16th. So the earliest any kind of A to F conversation could be had publicly, and it will still be embargoed, is December the 7th after the state board. So you have two state board meetings. One is to review the formula. The other is to, if they agree with the formula or make adjustments, to vote. And I'm sure they have already done runs of all different kinds of ways that they could use the ISTEP data. And so then a decision about A to F will be made after that. So probably at the same time we're getting back ISTEP scores, we're going to have potentially an A to F ranking.
Okay.
So I know.
Well.
So on the next, that's why I'm telling you all this at the same time.
Refresh my memory, Dr. Robinson, is the A to F rating, is that the new one or the old one?
Okay.
You know, the one that includes, you know, you get 100 points.
The different
or 50
points.
or-
All right.
Is that for?
This is
16,
supposedly the new one.
17? Okay.
But if on the 16th, the state board doesn't believe that the new one
Is ready to go.
is ready to go, then I have no idea what they're going to do.
Revert to the, okay.
Because if you remember last year, the grade only counted if it didn't hurt you. And they've already, since last year, adjusted the formula that gave you growth points. That's what you're referring to.
Right.
The growth.
We're at the
So,
growth point thing.
right. So I can't make this stuff up, I really
Well,
can't.
the question that I have is something that we as board members will need, and Julie might be the right person to answer this, but there is, there's data out there that indicates which students are better able to manage new or even some faulty testing mechanisms. And I know I've read these articles where upper income students are, how to put it, their ability to take a test that they've not specifically worked to achieve success on is better than children from, and this is, you know, just in general, but if you look at the income level of the students, it will predict their ability not just on how well they score, but how how better they are at adapting to a new test and new standards. Have I read those articles? I think I have.
Well, yes, but
I know I have, but.
from the beginning, we
I
talked
don't know,
about,
Tracy's here, I mean, maybe she knows what I'm talking about, but that this calamity doesn't fall on every socioeconomic group the same. That it hurts lower income students more than it does their upper income peer.
are you
No.
asking Tracy to respond?
Did I dream that?
No, there's research regarding student achievement based on income, if that's what you're alluding to.
I know that, but even with regard to changing testing, that the research.
Adapting to new situations,
to-
adapting to new types of questions, adapting to.
Well,
Because I don't think it's going to be, I mean, I think there'll be schools out there who will say, well, all this happened to us and look what we did. Our test scores didn't drop as much as yours did. So therefore, it's an indication of how good we are or how bad you are. And I'm sure that there's been research out there that indicates that when you're dealing with students across the spectrum, as we do, we have upper income kids, we have lower income kids. The kids in the lower income groups fare worse when they don't have the preparation for a changing test battery.
right, but this is not a new conversation. We had that problem with the old ISTEP, which is why, remember, they implemented growth. Because the part that, so let me say two different things. The reason the growth points are critical is that if a child comes to school and doesn't have the ability to do that adapting, and most of that's related to poverty and the experiences that you have, that's why a lot of our teachers are ended up working so much harder, because they're trying to replace some of the experiences the kids didn't come to school with. So that makes it even harder to teach. But then here's what this state's done. Then we added the technology piece that the company wasn't ready to roll out. So then you add on top of the ability to adapt, we're not testing anymore whether you know the language arts or the math. We're testing dragging and dropping and whether you can manipulate the technology. And my suburban brothers and sisters and my rural brothers and sisters don't want that either, because you're giving kids 6 answers and 4 of them could be right. Or you're having them drop and drag, which is, moving different pieces of a math problem, and the technology doesn't work. So you tell me how many third graders, when they try that 2 or 3 times, you don't even know what they don't know. So they've exacerbated it by putting a system around testing that frustrates not only the kids but the adults.
How many more slides do you have?
Just a few.
Okay.
So the one thing we do have is the graduation rates. We don't have the state, the district average. We believe that our district rate has gone up from what we can calculate, but we don't release it until they do, because it's on the website, and we're not going to put out a different number. But we do see a slight increase.
Well,
So here are the
probably
unknowns.
around 88%, but that's just a guess.
Here are the unknowns.
89.
89.
I'll
I'll bet
bet
it's
you.
around 80. Okay, we got a bet here. It's
Okay.
probably around 80.
Well, you can pay off. Here are the unknowns.
But we don't know.
Federal versus state. We've had that as a conversation. This block grant funding, public versus private, and then the status of all these different plans. And on top of all of that, we're going to merrily go down the road and probably right the day before we get ready to go for the holiday break, we're going to get ISTEP released in A to F grades when there's nobody here to respond to it. So this is the beginning of our response.
Well, and that's the point that I was trying to make. There will be districts, I think, who will not have that same start drop as ours. And I know I didn't get the response I was looking for, but I've read that research, and I can tell you that it's not just a question of performance on the test as related to socioeconomic status. It's the ability to handle changing tests that is also, and it's because your worldview that you bring into the test is so different. So you have a certain stored knowledge that allows you to kind of break through the barrier of a new test that doesn't have the adequate preparation. But I guess going back to your analogy of taking away the training wheels before you've had all lessons on how to ride the bike. I mean, when you get right down to it, we're the ones who are putting that child on the bike and pushing the bike. And I guess, the question is, if the child's gonna fall off anyway, I mean, at what point should we be complicit in it? I mean, if a school's gonna score a 35 on this test, or a 40, because there hasn't been the proper preparation due to the fact that there hasn't been enough work gone into the formulation of the standards and then the coordination of the standard to the test, then, where do we stop playing the game? Because the result's gonna be the same anyway. They could say, well, if you don't take the test, you're gonna be an F, but if you do take the test, you're gonna be an F. So what's the, help me understand the difference.
Well, let me just speak personally. I think that if you go back to that first grid that showed that we were going up and to the right, there's a certain amount of, a great deal of professional pride in this district. And we have teachers and administrators and parents who believe that poverty is a factor, but that we've never seen ourselves as a pitiful district. That there's an issue, a challenge we take very seriously. And I think the last slide shows the triple P. If you go back to the initiatives, go back one more, Laura. The initiatives we're working on this year is, when you're talking about that adaptability, part of that is the ability to have literacy and to read and to be able to do technical reading and to be able to problem solve and all those kinds of things. And traditionally, you do a lot of reading instruction in elementary, but it falls off. High school and secondary teachers don't necessarily focus on it. The whole concept of disproportionality, which is the fact that the number of times it's likely that you could be suspended from school, which is a special ed regulation, which is tied to the federal law based on your color. So I can't control right now all the stuff that the state's going to do. And being very honest, we can't either, other than having public conversations and making people aware. But we can work on, and we do a great job of trying to teach kids how to read. We can work on what we think are those skills that kids have to have, and we can also ensure that they're in school. Because, Mr. Giacono, when you said we're the ones pushing the bike, I don't think parents, even when they love and care for their kids, can understand all this stuff that the state throws at them. I mean, it's almost like they've made education so difficult, it's impossible to explain it. So if you're asking whether we should take the test or not, we should first of all fight for a test that will give teachers information. Then we should fight to not have the state use that test to label and blame everything. Because I don't think we're saying we don't want to be held accountable. I don't think teachers would tell you that they don't want to know information in order to change instruction. So we can just give up and accept it. Because being honest, how many districts are going to be out there having this conversation?
No, I agree with that.
I mean, so-
My concern is that there'll be some parochial schools in upper income areas that will say, well, we didn't have a problem. That's why we should have all this money, and the public schools shouldn't have any, without understanding that that has, very little to do with anything other than the income level of the students. I mean, we have some upper income level schools as well, and they've done, of course, much better on these tests. But I just think for those of us who've been in the schools and understand what our teachers are doing to overcome some of our families' challenges, it's just, it hurts to be a part of this rigged system. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that what was originally intended as a test to gauge how students were doing and to help guide instruction and to help teachers improve teaching has now morphed into something that the information is useless to parents, useless to students, useless to teachers. You don't get it on time. Who knows about its validity? And it's also clear that it's being used for purposes for which it was never intended, and probably in some cases political purposes.
That's what I was hoping you'd get around to,
Yeah,
because it
and-
feeds a false narrative.
Exactly.
Well,
And
yes to all of that. But I think the other thing that,
And one other thing, talking about our graduation rate, you know, the other thing about standardized testing is standardized testing assumes that every student is going to advance at the same rate, and anyone who's a parent or a teacher knows that that doesn't happen. Now, it's our job to graduate students and, you know, make them productive students, so, and productive citizens. And if we have discussed, you know, our graduation rate is probably the most important measurable that we have. And I think that it's something that our district can be proud of.
and it's a formula. And one of the things that, the processes that, you know, there's a waiver process. There's also lots of conversation about making sure that we get more credit for 5-year graduates, because it speaks to your point that everybody's not going to make it through in 4 years. So I think the part that of the intent of tonight's discussion is to say that in all of my years in education, I can pretty much kind of figure anything out. But I think the rug's been kind of yanked out from other public education, to Mr. Giacona's point, not so private education. I think that things that we used to be able to count on in terms of funding and support, those structures are being ripped apart. I think we're focusing on the wrong thing because we're talking a lot about the test, and most experts will tell you that the test, teachers need to know how to write assessments so they can change instruction. We just are going to have, and I won't be a part of a new test with a different name, but it does exactly the same thing that this one has done, which is label and sort and track. So I wish I had some definitive answers. Yes, I'm going down tomorrow, but this is what we're all about. And we just have to do what we've been doing, figure out different ways to communicate what we've been doing. I can't give you any guarantees about what will happen after January with no state
Well,
accountability.
could you get back to the board with a summary of the meeting tomorrow, I mean, all of us, so that we have an idea? That sounds to me like a pretty important meeting in terms of the
Yeah.
future of this assessment group and where they're going. I think we would all like to know what transpires at that meeting.
And the state board on the 16th.
And then, yeah, and then in addition to that, the to-do list, or the
Reach
action
out
item
to
would be to reach out to the superintendent-elect to see, you know, whether, I mean, we'll drive down there, I don't care. You know, we can meet there, we can meet here, we'll go wherever we need to go, we'll go to Indianapolis. But, you know, we need to tell the public education story from a Fort Wayne perspective. And I would say the sooner we get that word out, the better, so.
Can I just ask one real quick question, because it's been bothering me all evening? When we looked at the ISTEP score histories, obviously those were our students' results. Laura, did every school in Indiana have these similar kinds of drops? I mean, we're not alone, right? If you put an average of Indiana state scores for all students, it would have dropped off like this, right? So it's not like we aren't doing everything right here. It is a statewide problem for all of the schools who are trying to adjust to new standards, new assessments, new grading scales, I don't know what else to call them, criteria, I guess. So it's almost like we're all flying blind, because here we are, the school year is underway, and none of these pieces are in place. And I just want to commend all of you for not letting all this transition cause you to take your eye off the ball, which is educating our students, regardless of how the political and other things impact us as a district, but, you know, helping to encourage teachers to keep in mind the priorities, which is the kids need to learn. And we know how to do that. How they change the assessments and how they grade us as a district isn't, of course, it's important, but it's not going to cause us to stop doing the main thing, which is something all of you have been very diligent to continue with. Thank you.
But I think one of the things that Mr. Giaquina said earlier, that we just have to massage it and think about how we talk about it even more. The intent of the state's accountability is not to really give us information to tell us how well we're doing with kids, it's to prove a point. Because along with the accountability system and the A to F grading came the competition for tax dollars, and the public schools no longer were a monopoly. The conversation around the fact that when you ask what happened in other districts throughout the state, you could pretty much determine success on ISTEP based upon income. But then you add, when they've changed all the different, it's not just a straight test anymore, and there's so many different things you have to do to get an answer. It does come down to whether kids have had experiences to adapt to all the changes. But another group that is impacting, not as much as kids, because they're the core of it, are our professionals, our teachers. Because the reason we're focusing on disproportionality is that the schools reflect the communities and the society they reside in. So in smaller communities where everybody's the same, where the income levels are the same, and there aren't as many challenges, you can expect things to go one way. We're a very large, diverse district and proud of it. But this system doesn't give us any credit for that. And the only thing we have right now is growth, and we have no guarantee that the growth metric, those points that Julie was talking about, will even stay the same. That's one of the conversations they're having on the 16th. So, not a lot of answers, but we still have a lot of work to do. So thank you for listening.
Well, there's a good ESSA summary in the October Urban Educator, and, I would urge you all to read it. First, it discusses about $1 billion loss in funds being siphoned off from Title I to the states, and then it gets into the accountability system, and it's going to create a much, much more robust method for targeting schools for takeover and intervention. So, that's the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing. First,
It's the setup.
yeah, it's a setup. And then, and then there are new regulations on supplement, not supplant, which you're probably aware of, which is also going to be very difficult because you have to raise additional funds to take care of those items that they've got a stricter set of regulations for the supplanting rules that we've talked about here from time to time. So it's going to be a very challenging year. And to your point, Glenna, I think as sure as we're sitting here, however, you will hear that some schools didn't drop. That was the point of my comments, that there will be some that did not drop. But it's again related to income levels, not necessarily the effort going into the classroom. And that's the point. But anyway, we'll see. There'll be widespread drops. There's no question about it. But those that don't will certainly try to convince everyone that it's the result of their great teaching and processes and not the income level of the students. Right. And we've heard that before. Well, Dr. Robinson, thank you very much for that summary. We appreciate it. We move next. That does conclude our agenda tonight. We move next to, at least I hope it does. I took my agenda out. It does, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay,
It
great.
does.
There's nothing else back there? No. So our next meeting is November 28th. We'll move into the comments from board members and then adjourn the meeting and open up the microphone to anybody who cares to address the board. Steve?
Friday, I received an invitation to a meeting that's scheduled for tomorrow. I'm not sure if you got it, but the Urban League is hosting a meeting regarding ESSA, and I'm going to be attending. Jonathan Ray, the executive director, will be facilitating the meeting along with an individual from Goodwill of Indianapolis who has some knowledge about the new federal law. I've had several sessions. I participated in several sessions about ESSA. as given by the NSBA, so I'll take notes, and if you're unable to attend, I'll share those with you.
Yeah, I don't think I was invited, so you'll have to, I can crash, but
Are you teaching tomorrow?
yes,
Okay, I'll take good notes.
okay.
Nothing, thank you.
Well, this last week was a tough week. Yeah, I'll be real honest with you. I'm usually not political, but this being the next to last month, what are they gonna do, you know? But I am still wearing my pantsuit. If there's anybody that has any obvious wonder of why I'm sad. But I need to tell you, what happened this week was also extraordinary as a wonderful salve for my agony when I went on a tour of Northside High School with Dave West. I didn't know Dave real well. I knew Chad, and I knew what a wonderful school it was, but it was such a needed thing for me to get in that school and to listen to his dedication and passion for the students, to walk through those really beautifully clean halls with students of incredible backgrounds and origins. You know, they're smiling, they're high-fiving Mr. West. They are in those doors when the door, you know, when the bell rings. There's nobody in the halls. I don't know how he quite does that, but I was really impressed with that. Teachers were engaged. I had one teacher, I just kind of went in and waved, and I realized she was in a discussion with her class, and we kept walking down the hall, and she ran out in the hall, and she said, I want to tell you what we're doing in here. And so she went on to explain this marvelous program that these kids were working with. People were engaged. They were happy where they were. I've talked to a lot of teachers this week, and I was really concerned about the reactions to the election and all that sort of thing. I had not heard of any. I knew there was one having to do with a bus driver, but that's all I've heard. I'm saying we have a microcosm here, and we have to treasure it because of the way the training has been done for our staff and our students. I was really lucky to go to Showcase on Saturday. And, you know, if you just need to feel joy sometimes, even if you don't have kids, go to that, because everybody is engaged. Every teacher, every administrator is there. They are so proud of their schools. They are so happy to see you there. They are engaged with parents. Parents were coming in, and they'd be surrounded by all these people who are giving them answers and showing them things on the tables and all that sort of thing. So there are wonderful things happening in this district, and we are a showcase for the world on how we work together in a diverse society. And I could not be prouder than that, and by God, I needed that week. So I thank you, humbled, I really do. I am humbled by what I saw, and I'm thrilled to have been a part of all of this. It was great. Thank you.
Well, I too was able to take part in a feel-good activity on Wednesday. Wednesday morning, there was a celebration at Construction Trades for the new building that they have, and to thank all the, oh my gosh, there were probably maybe 30 to 40 people from the business community there, businesses who had helped with donations of time and work and equipment and money to help build that building. And I got to meet some of the construction trade students and most of the staff. And they are so and also celebrate the addition of the new HVAC plumbing program. That is something that Construction Trades has wanted and has been working on for about 4 years. And so they've got their first class this year, and they're really excited about it. That was something that when they build a house every year, they always outsourced. But now they've got the kids to do it themselves. And also it was something that that the business community and, you know, the HVAC business owners, something that they wanted. You know, they need, I know the guy that fixed my air conditioner a couple weeks ago is probably, oh, maybe he's close to my age. But these are people that we've, you know, that our community is going to have to replace. But it was really exciting. And the food, oh my gosh, the breakfast was provided by our culinary arts students, and it was fabulous. There were students there. I took a little tour of the building, and there were construction trade students working on their masonry and concrete skills, and talk about diversity. It was awesome. White, black, Latino, female, which was just terrific. All of them just, you know, working together. And then the greatest thing was, it was a really cool story. Larry Gerardo, who's the principal of the Anthus Academy, told me a really neat story that that Tuesday morning, before school, there was a automotive student who was in line to vote, and he was just chatting with a relative about what he was doing in his automotive classes and how, you know, excited he was about it. And somebody behind him in line tapped him on the shoulder and said that he was so impressed just listening to this student speak that he offered him a job with a local trucking company.
Wow.
So, I mean, all of that, I think, just really speaks well for the wonderful things in all of our programs that go on there at the Anthus Academy. So, yes, that was an uplifting day.
I also attended the showcase, and my husband and I both went, in particular, to see, I don't remember her name, the college and career.
Shanita Piper.
Shanita Piper? Yeah. She did a presentation on preparing your children for college and getting into college and things like that. And I thought my husband should go because he hasn't done any of the research. I've been doing it all myself. And I went into it thinking, well, I probably know everything, but you know, she'll just do the basics that I already know, but this will be good for my husband. And I was really very impressed. I mean, with the time that she had, she crammed in the most important things you need to know about going to college and preparing yourself in high school. And, you know, so I learned something too, and my husband, so we were very glad that we were able to learn from her. And I was just so impressed about, like I said, you know, getting everything valuable in that short period of time. So that was my non-depressing thing for the week.
Well, and you know, that reminds me, and I had forgotten about it, but we also had a work session.
Right.
Last week, and there were members of the FACE team there, and
Right.
Shanita Piper was there.
Yeah, so I got
College
to
and
see
Career
her in
Readiness.
action, to see what she actually does and what she knows, and, you know, it was very impressive.
Right, yeah, everybody that presented what's going on with the programs that they have were, I mean, I was really impressed. I was also impressed, and I think, again, this speaks to your leadership, Dr. Robinson, is that they have brought in people from higher education with higher education recruiting experience, you know, experience on the other side. And that just brings a fresh perspective, I think, for the district and for the knowledge of what students need to prepare, that I think is only going to benefit our students.
Right, and it is so, because I was a guidance counselor, and, you know, now that I have a kid and going to college, you know, 10 years ago, it was completely different. So, I mean, everything has changed so much. So it is great that we do have someone who's been there and done that, and can help us. And that was what she was very open to, you know, call me, email me, I will help you. I can meet with your student, meet with you. And so it was nice.
And that's something that our middle school and our high school students need to take advantage of. I mean, I know they've got their first, what do they call it, a college readiness class or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think she said they had about 50-some middle school students and about 20 high school students that were going through that, so.
With some financial literacy, too.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it encompasses several things, but there will be another one. I'm sure they'll do the same thing this spring, but that's just something, particularly, parents and students need to look out for. Sorry about that.
No comments.
Dr. Robinson, any reports from you on Nebraska or any other?
We met with the Kathy, Liz Bryant, Darren, and Josh, and I met with our new best friend, Chris Chateau, Nebraska Neighborhood Association. They invited us to be a part of their meeting last week. About 20 people. Gave us an opportunity to outline the building, plans for the building, but also do some preliminary conversation on the program potentially for the building. I thought it was a wonderful conversation. They had lots of myths that we helped them clarify. We have another work session on the 18th, and this will be very specifically about the alternative programs, not just Ward in Nebraska, but in general. We invited them. They committed to trying to have somebody there who can go back and tell the rest of the community. We established a little bit earlier a relationship where we'll kind of, Krista was there also, we'll send them information to share with the neighborhood association, but I was informed by Mr. Chateau that the people who run the neighborhood association, we had all of them there, and great opportunity. So they'll be there, hopefully somebody will be there on the 18th, and then we committed to coming back as the plans are firmed up, to give them another opportunity to kind of talk through it. They were very appreciative and understood their role and committed to helping us make that make sense. It's a great meeting. The other thing I want to just talk about is Snyder football. They're playing at Westfield on Friday.
7:30 Friday.
7:30 Friday. So we just want to give a shout out to Snyder and all the other fall sports for girls and boys. One of the things that we overlook, and we've got to find a way to honor them more, the number of hours coaches put in with somebody else's kids. It is scary. But when you talk to the kids and the parents, kids will do things for their coaches, no matter what the sport is. We get basketball and football get a lot of attention. The other thing that was really evident at the Choice Fair, the number of clubs. We have got to have a conversation publicly about the number of clubs. I don't know if you noticed the robotics club from at Northrop. So much excitement for the kinds of things that are happening. But just wanted to honor Snyder, but then just thank everybody who helped our kids all fall.
And really, what a disconnect between the conversation we're having right now and the conversation we had 20 minutes ago. I mean, it's just really, and frankly, the conversation that preceded it with Mr. King and his students and even the school nurses, I mean, it's almost like an alternative universe. It's really strange. So, and the thought that, that others would deem the district in need of an intervention or a takeover, it's just, it's absurd. But we live in strange, or interesting times, strange times as well. Dr. Robinson, there's a rumor floating around about a chant involving our Wayne girls soccer team. Have you heard anything about that? Okay.
Chris would know.
Okay. You've not heard any?
It wasn't about the soccer, it was at a girls' basketball game.
Okay.
And it was only maybe 20 or 30 seconds, and of course it was on election day, last Tuesday, when it occurred. Mr. Hauser was present at the time. So he had follow-up with the girls after that, talked to our students. But it wasn't our students who were making the chant.
No, it wasn't our students, it was the opposing team? Okay.
And they were chanting "Build the Wall."
Yeah. Have we reached out to the school involved or how are we handling that?
We have, Mr. Hauser met with our girls, the players on our team, talked to them afterwards. So he's talked with our students. I don't know that he's contacted the opposing school yet.
We'll follow up with that part. I think this brings up a point, though.
And what we're talking about is that, so it was our Wayne High School girls basketball team?
Yes.
And the opposing team start with an N? Okay. And they were chanting "Build the Wall"?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we ought to really communicate to the school board members from Norwell to let them know that that's not acceptable. I mean, I would bet they would be embarrassed. At least I hope they would as well, so. I'm sorry, Dr. Robinson.
We're having internal conversations because when an election is pretty much 50-50, you have 50% of the people that have one feeling and 50% who have the other. I think the election process was so mean-spirited by the time it ended that we as adults forget that our kids watch and hear everything we do. And so we're very deliberately trying to make sure the teachers are aware of what conversations they're having in front of kids. Have not had a lot of things reported that kids are bringing things to school, but we're treating this like we would with any kind of impact on our culture and climate. The intolerance is something we work on, but we will follow up with that school.
Yeah, I think we would appreciate it if that would be followed up on. If our kids at any of our schools chanted that at, young adults from another school, I would certainly want to know about it. So I think we should reach out in some constructive fashion, say, look, we're concerned about it, we're sure you are too, and, we'll count on you to take appropriate action or something like that. The other issue I have, two administrative issues. I will not be here on the 18th. I'm going to be out of the state on business, so I will miss that. But we do have a couple policy committee meetings coming up, and I know they were scheduled back-to-back. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'd like to keep the 22nd, because if we were there on the 21st and can't be there on the 22nd, but we work up ahead of steam, we could meet again on the 22nd and maybe finish up some of the work on the 22nd that we don't finish on the 21st. I don't know what policies are going to be presented, so I would like for that to not be taken off the agenda just yet.
Okay, well, it is a scheduling issue, and we probably never should have published those back-to-back. We were just putting all those dates out. But we can do the one on the 21st, and if you want to handle the one on the 22nd. We're going to start with, we had talked about bringing back professional learning policies, and those will be sent out to you before we have that meeting.
Okay.
And then we have to start thinking about, we got to get back to the series. What have
Right.
we done, especially now with some of the changes in the laws.
But if you get us going in the right direction with me on the 21st, and we have, and the three of us can continue working on the 22nd, we can maybe keep the effort going within the parameters that we set on the 21st. So could we just keep it scheduled anyway? We can always cancel it, but,
We'll post both of those.
okay, all right. And we can talk about it more. The other administrative issue, we don't have too many more meetings. I want to give the rest of the board a quick heads up. The officers have been meeting with Dr. Robinson because we got a little bit behind, not a little bit, quite a bit behind on the draft and approval of her contract, which expired actually, and we've been kind of working on a handshake. So we want to formalize that and share the preliminary outline with the rest of the board in an executive session. We won't make any decisions. That'd just be for information sharing. And we really want to get this done. Whether it requires a special meeting, it does. I mean, that's not a big deal. We just have to give 48 hours notice. But I'm saying this publicly because I want us committed to it publicly. So now we are, and we're going to get this thing done. And I'm doing the lion's share of the drafting. Every once in a while, I'll run into something that we didn't think about in the meeting, and then I got to go back. But we're down to the fine strokes. So we'll keep working on that, and then bring the rest of the board in, get an executive session, and try to schedule a meeting to get that approved before the end of the year. I'd really like that to be done before our newest member comes on, because it's going to be a lot for him to digest, and it would really kind of cause us to have to further delay it, and that's not fair to Dr. Robinson. So,
I'm just maybe a moot question, but there's also an evaluation. How's that moving of Wendy for the last?
well,
I mean, I
Two
don't know.
are outstanding.
yeah, one,
Oh, okay.
two are outstanding. Well, no, one is outstanding, but one interview we've missed. I mean, we've tried, but I got here an hour early and Dr. Robinson wasn't available, and so, anyway. So, but my evaluation's done. So,
Okay, I just didn't
So-
know, because that's something that probably needs to be done before I leave the board too, I would think, but maybe.
yeah, I don't, well, for
I just
purposes of the contract or what?
Yeah, I don't know, those are just two things, the contract.
Well,
and
did you turn your evaluation in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did you have your interview?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay, good, all right. So, I think you're the other one who needs to turn yours in, okay. All right, the last thing is, we have, again, because we have very few meetings, in the past, next year's officers, we've communicated that to Steve. I will not be in the chair next year, so why don't you communicate your ideas to me this time, and we'll proceed that way. But I just, in general, I certainly have asked Julie, who's the vice president of the board, if she'd be willing to step in, and the answer was yes, she would be, so just keep that in mind as you communicate with me. But you all know my phone number, email, so feel free to give me a call, and we'll start the process of getting prepared for that first meeting next year, because we have precious few left this year with the holidays and all, so let's do that. Two more, so that's why I'm bringing it up tonight. And that's all I've got. So with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signify by
Aye.
saying aye.
Aye.
So carried. So the business meeting is now formally adjourned.